How many generations would it take for someone from a working class, low-wage background for their family to reach somewhere near the top?
The UK is 5 generations. The problem we have in this country is that it's run by the rich, for the rich. Say, David Cameron and Boris Johnson. The ability for me to do something similar, like go to Oxford, become an MP, was 1,000 times less likely. The idea that it's all on you, that it's all about your hard work, is just not true.
So, Faiza, thank you so much for joining me to chat about your new book, Know Your Place. A big question, is social mobility in our society a lie?
Yes. Let me put it that way. I mean, we're told that it's all hard work, or it's mostly hard work. But when you look at what really defines life chances, when you look at the factors that matter the most, the number one factor that defines 2/3 of where you will end up in the income spectrum is the country you're born in. We forget that factor altogether. And then even when you take that out, it's the wealth of your family, it's the school you go to, it's your race and class, all of those things come in. So one of the things I say in the book is the difference even with myself and say David Cameron and Boris Johnson. So I was born to a car mechanic in East London. And when you look at the difference in paths, just as an illustration, the ability for me to do something similar, like go to Oxford, become an MP, was 1,000 times less likely than David Cameron and Boris Johnson. And for a lot of us, once you look at that gap, it's not that, okay, you can work hard and you can make it, but why should anyone work 1,000 times harder to do exactly the same job? And so, the idea that it's all on you, that it's all about your hard work and not about societal factors around you is just not true.
And you write about the national minimum wage versus what people would actually need to live kind of a nice, not even nice, but, an okay life. What are the differences between what people are earning on that minimum wage and what people would need to earn?
There's a minimum wage set by the government, and then there's also kind of benefits levels. Now, both of those levels aren't actually enough to give people a decent life. Now, a decent life, there's various surveys and various ways of doing this, but the one that is probably the best, I would say, is one done by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation that looks at, it talks to people, it looks at what people need to feel like they can be part of society in a way that is, they can feel no shame, they can partake in all of the things that they need to in life. And there is a very clear gap there. And when you look at that, you kind of can't help but think, well, why are we setting minimum wages and benefit levels knowing that still keeps people in poverty? We literally have poverty wages in this country. The number of people in poverty and in work is growing and growing.
And how did austerity cuts affect your family and affect your mum?
Yeah, I think sometimes people think of austerity as something that was like a long time ago. But from 2010 onwards, we've been subject to a public spending squeeze, which of course is still felt in the wages of teachers and nurses and other public sector workers. But I think there was such a human cost of that sometimes is forgotten when you're not on the front line of receiving that. And I personally wasn't, but I saw what happened to my mum, who was very sick, had heart failure, was on disability benefits. That there was a threat of that being taken away like there was for thousands of others. And these people came to the house and pretty aggressively asking about whether she could work or not and all these questions. And it was humiliating for her. And I don't know why I was at home that day. I was upstairs and I could hear her constantly say, I want to work. If I could, I would work. And I think there's something that happened with austerity that was also about really making people feel if they were struggling, like they were losers, like they had done something really wrong to society, that they were cheating people. And, the lack of empathy for people having a hard time that came through those welfare cuts. So it was a narrative, it was a story about these people and benefit cheats. But the reality of that, as I could see it, was that people that really needed support were just kind of really badly treated.
And how many generations would it take for someone from a working class, low wage background for their family to reach somewhere near the top?
Yeah, there was this really great study done by the OECD, which is the think tank for rich countries, as it's named. And it showed the difference between different countries and how long that would take if, everything goes to plan and you manage to move up. So for a country like Norway that is very equal, invests a lot in public services, it's 2 generations. But in the UK, it's 5 generations. And if you take a generation, say 25 years, that's like your great-great-granddad. I mean, it's like such a long time.
Not all countries are like kind of Sweden and Norway and things. But given in many ways we can see that works, why is it that the UK is not more like that? Is there just not the will? Is there not the desire?
Yeah, I do think it comes down to political will. I mean, I work with a lot of governments around the world, or I have been the last couple of years, governments where they are trying to do the right thing or trying to look at these issues like Spain and Costa Rica and various other countries around the world. And one thing I've noticed, the difference in the leadership is there's this real sense of purpose and vision to do something about the gap between the very rich and the rest of us. Once you've got that in mind, once you've got a clear goal in mind that you actually want to deliver, and you are willing, and this is the key thing, you're willing to say there needs to be some type of sacrifices at the very top, where there can be more taxes, where there can be more efforts to address privilege, then you can make things happen. The problem we have in this country is that for the most part, it's run by the rich, for the rich. And you can see that in various ways in the press kind of every day. And we saw it very strongly with the corruption issues, quite frankly, around PPE contracts. And it's certainly, having had this international experience of working with different governments, I've been really struck by just the inertia at the top here and how that's done on purpose, just to make sure that the wealth is kept there.
You hear a lot people say, change the whole system. What does that mean in terms of taking the current system and changing it? What does that mean in practice?
Yeah, so I think sometimes people can feel a bit overwhelmed when people like me go, we can't just do one little policy over here. This requires kind of rethinking the system. What are we doing on work? What are we doing on wages? So it requires us to look across different points, work, education, taxes, green jobs, how the political system is working, and make some critical changes in all of those areas. And one thing that I say in the book, there is ways to bring that together. So something that has been used in other countries is a solidarity tax. So, and I really like it because of the wording, solidarity. And people don't often think of taxes as a way to build unity amongst groups. But it's something that's been used in different countries at different points of crisis. And it's a way to say, look, we've got to tax the rich a bit more at this point because we need to, in Germany's case, they were reunifying Germany. In this case, the next generation, unless we make huge investments at this point, are going to be in trouble. So how about a solidarity tax to the next generation? Saying to the people that have managed to make money, especially through housing wealth, for instance, right, we're going to just take a tiny bit of this, bring it together, and we're going to invest it in things that will help the next generation.
Mm. And are you thinking particularly climate there, or are you thinking very kind of society and class?
Yeah, I think climate is the most obvious thing, but the beauty of climate investment is that you can do it in a way that also creates a lot of non-graduate jobs. It can also do things like tilt our economic activity to parts of the UK that have been forgotten, that haven't had a lot of economic prosperity. I mean, that's the beauty of renewable energy in a sense that you don't do it in London. You can tip it away from the typical places that economic prosperity has happened. The other big thing, and I talk about this a lot in the book, is care work. Underpaid, undervalued, such an important aspect of people's lives, whether it's their children or the women that looked after my own mother. You could invest in a new universal, free at the point of use childcare system, high quality, that sort of thing that will open up so much for this country, which will make society better, but will also make us prosper economically.
Mm. And is there things people can do at a local level?
Yeah, definitely. I would say there are a few things that you should do at the local level. So one is, look for local community projects, look at things that are happening, for instance, on, of course, people point to food bank usage, which is terrible, and you can be a volunteer there. But if you want to do something else, look at how you can support people in rented accommodation or accommodation that is in trouble. We had a housing issue locally where a group of tenants were going to get kicked out of their housing in one go just before Christmas. It was really mean. And they were private rented tenants. But the community came together, they pushed back, they signed petitions, they managed to get media, and the housing company running the housing had to back down. So there's things you can do, and you'll be surprised the difference it makes in terms of the change you can see when you come together. It feels impossible on your own, but try as much as possible to join community groups. Make sure that you are questioning the way the world works. The biggest ambition you can have is not just for yourself, but for the community you live in, for the country that we have, for this world. And that is the way to actually change things for yourself as well. I've laid out lots of policies in the book and lots of things we can do. So I hope it's like a rallying call to people to, basically be like, no, I don't accept this. I don't accept this place. But the only way to change that is to work together.
Well, I thought the book was great, so interesting. So many things to take away from it. Thanks so much for this chat.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you.